In 1976, the National Cancer Institute screened a tropical plant and documented something extraordinary. The leaves and stem showed active cytotoxicity against cancer cells. The compounds they isolated killed malignant cells in laboratory tests at levels that should have made international headlines. One compound alone was measured at 10,000 times the potency of adriamycin, one of the most commonly used chemotherapy drugs on the planet. The study was completed. The results were published. And then, silence. 50 years of silence. Think about what happened in those 50 years. The war on cancer was declared in 1971. Billions of dollars poured into research. Chemotherapy protocols were refined and re-refined. Targeted therapies emerged. Immunotherapy promised a new frontier. And throughout all of it, every press conference, every breakthrough announcement, every pink ribbon campaign, this study sat in a filing cabinet, gathering dust, while people died. No human trials, no pharmaceutical development, no press conferences. The research was filed internally, never released to the public. And while those papers gathered dust in government archives, 13,000 kilometers away in the Philippines, grandmothers continued doing what they had done for generations, squeezing the juice from this same fruit for children who were weak, brewing tea from its leaves for those who couldn't sleep, serving it fresh to cool fevers. They called it guyabano, and they never needed a government study to know it worked. This is the story of the most aggressively researched and systematically ignored tropical plant in modern medical history. The story of what science found, why the research stopped, and what 500 years of ancestral knowledge can teach us about the machinery that decides which cures get developed and which get buried. Welcome to Nature's Blacklist. Every 57 seconds, someone in America receives a cancer diagnosis. Let that sink in. By the time you finish this video, over a dozen families will have heard the words no one wants to hear. 2 million new cases this year. 618,000 deaths. And throughout this relentless toll, families search desperately for anything that might offer hope beyond the protocols that leave them nauseated, bald, and terrified. Now let me show you exactly what they found. The National Cancer Institute is not a fringe organization. It is the United States government's principal agency for cancer research. In 1976, during a plant screening program, NCI scientists tested extracts from a tree known as Annona muricata, called soursop in the Caribbean, guanabana in Latin America, graviola in Brazil, and guyabano in the Philippines. The leaves and stem showed active toxicity against cancer cells, but the NCI study was just the beginning. At Purdue University, Dr. McLaughlin and his team spent years isolating the active compounds, Annonaceous acetogenins. What they found was startling. These compounds could kill cancer cells with extraordinary selectivity. Here's the problem with chemotherapy. Cancer cells fight back. They develop multi-drug resistance, internal pumps that literally expel chemo drugs before they can work. Each round becomes less effective. The acetogenins in guyabano shut down those pumps. They cut the ATP power supply that fuels the resistance mechanism. The resistant cells, the ones chemo couldn't kill, die. A 1996 study in the Journal of Natural Products found that one compound, Annonacin, killed colon cancer cells at 10,000 times the potency of adriamycin. 10,000 times. To understand why that number matters, you need to understand what adriamycin does to a body. It's one of the most effective chemotherapy drugs ever developed, and one of the most brutal. It doesn't just kill cancer cells, it damages the heart muscle, permanently. Oncologists track something called lifetime dose, because beyond a certain point, adriamycin will kill you faster than the cancer. Patients develop what's called chemo brain, cognitive fog that can last years. They lose their hair, their appetite, their sense of taste. Their immune systems collapse, leaving them vulnerable to infections that healthy people fight off without noticing. Now imagine a compound that showed the same cancer-killing power multiplied by 10,000 without those effects. Imagine if the science suggested it could target the cancer and leave the healthy tissue alone. That's not a minor improvement. That's a paradigm shift. That's the kind of finding that should have had pharmaceutical companies fighting to fund trials. By 1997, Purdue announced these compounds were especially effective against cells that had survived chemotherapy. The cells that chemo couldn't kill. The acetogenins could. Now, this is where the story takes a turn that kept me awake for 3 nights. These are laboratory studies, in vitro, cells in petri dishes. The human body is infinitely more complex than a laboratory culture. What functions in a controlled environment frequently fails in the chaos of actual human biology. Promising in vitro results are common. Successful human trials are rare. But if the initial results were this extraordinary, if multiple independent laboratories across different continents confirmed similar findings, why did no one pursue human trials? Why did the research simply stop? The answer is not conspiracy. It is economics. To bring a new drug to market requires FDA approval, clinical trials costing between $1 and $2 billion. Meanwhile, families facing cancer spend $150,000 on treatment. Some cancers push that to $500,000. Medical bankruptcy is the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy in America. They found money to charge you $150,000 for treatment. They couldn't find money to test a fruit that grows on trees? Let me put this in perspective. In 2023, the top 10 pharmaceutical companies made $350 billion in combined revenue. Pfizer alone made $100 billion. These are not struggling enterprises searching couch cushions for research funding. These are corporations that spend more on marketing than research, more on lobbying than clinical trials, more on stock buybacks than breakthrough discoveries. And when a study showed a compound 10,000 times more potent than their flagship chemotherapy drug, growing on trees across the tropical world, available to anyone with a backyard, they calculated the return on investment and walked away. You cannot patent a plant. Purdue filed 9 patents on extraction processes, but the fruit itself remained freely available. Anyone could grow one. Where is the billion-dollar return on medicine patients can cultivate in their gardens? The system was not designed to research things that cannot be sold exclusively. The system didn't suppress a cure. It simply refused to confirm one, because confirming it would have meant selling it. And you can't sell what anyone can grow. This is not villainy. This is structure. Research follows money. Money follows patents. And some things, things that grow from the earth, things that cannot be owned, fall outside the system's ability to recognize them. And if you or someone you love has ever faced cancer, if you've watched someone you care about lose their hair, lose their appetite, lose their hope, you deserved to know this research existed. You deserved that choice. For 50 years, it was made for you. But here's what the economics textbooks don't account for. While boardrooms calculated returns on investment, somewhere in the Philippines, a grandmother was doing something that no patent could capture. Ask any Filipino about guyabano, and you will hear stories. Not abstract data points, lived memories. Lola in the kitchen, hands stained with the white pulp, extracting juice for a child who looked pale and tired. The sweet, tangy flesh, masarap they call it, meaning delicious, spooned out for someone recovering from illness. The leaves dried and steeped into tea for a family member who couldn't sleep, whose nerves were frayed, whose body needed rest. This was gamot, medicine, but not the kind from pharmacies. This was medicine from the tree behind the house, the same tree Lolo planted decades ago. Guyabano was not a supplement. It was not a trend. It was not sold in capsule form with marketing claims. It was simply what families did. Wisdom passed from Lola to Apo, mother to daughter, generation to generation. Kung may sakit ka, guyabano. If you're sick, guyabano. No clinical trial required. I want you to picture something. It's a humid afternoon in Quezon City. A child comes home from school, pale, complaining of stomach pain. In America, the first response is Pepto-Bismol, maybe a call to the pediatrician, maybe a trip to urgent care and a $200 bill. In that house in Quezon City, Lola goes to the tree in the backyard. She doesn't Google anything. She doesn't check WebMD. She does what her mother did, and her mother before that. 20 minutes later, the child is drinking fresh guyabano juice, sweet and cold. By evening, the color has returned to his face. Was it the vitamins? The hydration? The placebo effect of being cared for by someone who loves you? Or was it the same acetogenins that researchers would document decades later in sterile laboratories? The Filipino grandmother doesn't know the mechanism. She doesn't need to. She knows it works. And that knowledge, passed down through centuries of observation, refined by millions of individual experiments conducted in kitchens across an archipelago of 7,000 islands, that knowledge is real. It is valid. And for 50 years, science ignored it. When researchers in laboratories documented anti-cancer activity, they were confirming what Filipino households had intuited for 500 years. The science was not discovering something new. It was catching up to something ancient. Alam na natin ito. We've always known this. And the Philippines is not alone. In Brazil, where they call it graviola, traditional healers have used the leaves for anxiety and sleep for generations. The same compounds that kill cancer cells also calm the nervous system. In Mexico and across Central America, abuelitas prepare guanabana the same way lolas prepare guyabano, fresh for the sick, tea for the sleepless. In the Caribbean, in Jamaica and Trinidad, in Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, the fruit is so common it's simply part of life. Soursop juice, soursop ice cream, soursop in the hands of every grandmother who ever cared for a child with fever. In a small kitchen in Guadalajara, an abuelita cuts open a guanabana. The fruit is ugly by supermarket standards. Green, spiny, misshapen, but she knows what's inside. She scoops the white flesh into a blender, adds water, a little sugar, strains out the seeds. The grandchildren line up with cups. Para la salud, she says. For health. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from hers. The chain of knowledge stretches back further than anyone can remember, further than the arrival of the Spanish, further than the name guanabana itself. Indigenous peoples of Central America used this fruit before colonizers had words to describe it. And now, in 2025, those grandchildren, some of them living in Los Angeles, Houston, Miami, walk past this same fruit in Latino markets without recognizing it. The chain is breaking. The knowledge is being lost. Different continents, different languages, different names, same plant, same wisdom, same silence from the institutions that should have listened. This is not coincidence. This is convergent knowledge. Independent populations observing the same effects across centuries, validating each other without ever meeting. Let me be clear. This is not a claim that guyabano cures cancer. We do not have the human trials to make that claim. We have laboratory data and traditional use, a hypothesis that deserves investigation, not proof that warrants treatment changes. Do not abandon medical care based on this video. Work with your oncologist. Bring them this information. Initiate a conversation that should have happened 50 years ago. I am not a doctor. I cannot tell you what will work for your body, your cancer, your situation. I can only tell you what the research found, what tradition has preserved, and what the system chose not to pursue. The decision about what to do with this information, that's yours. It has always been yours. They just never gave you the information to make it. That said, the fact that human trials do not exist is not evidence that the plant does not work. It is evidence that no one funded the trials. Absence of proof is not proof of absence. It is proof of neglect. I've given you the science. I've given you the history. Now let me give you something you can use. Guyabano is not hard to find. If you're in the United States, check your local Asian supermarket, H-Mart, 99 Ranch, Seafood City if you're near a Filipino community. Latin markets in any major city will carry it, often labeled guanabana or graviola. Amazon sells dried leaves for tea, though the quality varies, so look for suppliers with verified sourcing from the Philippines or South America. Look for the oversized green heart covered in soft spines. The flesh is white and creamy, somewhere between strawberry and pineapple. The taste is unique. Some describe it as a combination of strawberry and pineapple with hints of coconut. Others say it's like nothing else. The texture is creamy, slightly fibrous. Many people's first reaction is, why have I never tried this before? Eat it fresh or blend into smoothies. The dried leaves are available for tea. Here's something you can verify for yourself. Buy a guyabano. Try it. If you know a Filipino family, ask them about it. Watch their faces light up. If you have an abuelita in your life, say guanabana and see what stories come out. This isn't abstract knowledge, it's living tradition. And now, it's yours. One caution. The seeds and roots may contain neurotoxic compounds in excessive amounts. Traditional preparations use leaves and fruit pulp only. Pregnant women should consult a doctor, as ATP-affecting compounds could theoretically impact fetal development. But here is what matters most. You now have information locked in academic journals for half a century. Information that could have empowered families navigating the most terrifying diagnoses of their lives. Purdue identified over 40 compounds with anti-cancer properties. 40. Not one lucky finding, a systematic library of potential weapons. And not a single one entered clinical trials. I am not telling you the system is evil. I am telling you it has blind spots large enough to lose a cancer breakthrough inside them. Every Filipino who ever heard their Lola talk about guyabano, you were right. Every Latin American who grew up drinking guanabana, your abuela knew something. Every family from the Caribbean, from Brazil, from West Africa, from Southeast Asia, who turned to this fruit when someone was sick, your traditions were not superstition. They were not primitive medicine from people who did not know better. They were observation, careful, generational observation. And the science eventually proved it. And here's the question that haunts me. How many other cures are sitting in filing cabinets, too democratic to profit from? Guyabano is not unique in this. It's just the one I chose to investigate. The one with 50 years of documented research. The one with 500 years of documented use. The one where the trail of evidence was too clear to ignore. This is about a system that only recognizes solutions it can sell. Everything that falls outside, Every plant that grows freely, every remedy passed between generations gets classified as alternative or folklore. Not because it does not work, but because working is not the metric that matters. Here's what I believe. I believe that knowledge wants to be free, that truth eventually finds a way out, that no system, no matter how powerful, no matter how profitable, can suppress information forever when people decide to share it. For 50 years, this knowledge lived in archives and kitchens, separated by oceans and institutional walls. Today, it lives in a video that can cross both in seconds. You are not just a viewer. You are a node in a network of knowledge transmission that no corporation controls. What you do next determines whether this stays buried or finally breaks free. The knowledge existed for 50 years in the archives. It existed for 500 years in the kitchens. Now it exists in your mind. The only thing the system cannot control is what you decide to do with it. If this vault opens something for you, if this information is something you believe others deserve to know, subscribe to Nature's Blacklist. The algorithm is deciding right now whether this reaches 1,000 people or 1 million. That decision happens in the next 30 seconds based on what you do. A like tells the system this matters. A share puts this in front of someone who might need it. A comment breaks the silence. Every person who shares this video is doing something that billion-dollar institutions refuse to do for 50 years. Spreading knowledge that cannot be sold. The next vault opens soon.